How does Uchumi gets his operations? Recently, Uchumi has recorded a profit of 8 million. KBLC has no competitors, so yeah, that's one. An entrepreneur can be an entrepreneur by the way can be in any quadrant. Personally, I don't invest in companies that I don't use. There are 4 types of people. The 4 types of people are categorized into 4 quadrants. Welcome back to the Matters Mindset podcast, where we are planning for a rebrand to the Innovate and Invest podcast, where we'll be talking about financial literacy and business. That I will be hosting that sector, and Caleb will be hosting the startup and entrepreneurship sector. Okay. So on March 19th, we'll be hosting the CEO Roundtable, where we'll be having a couple of CEOs over here and having their thoughts on matters to do with finance and business. So onto the session. So today's session will be rather on a React session and a tutorial session rather than a discussion, because one of us is absent. Okay? So there are four types of people in business. There are 4 types of people. The 4 types of people are categorized into 4 quadrants, 2 halves. Yeah. So the first half is where I can say majority Kenyans belong to, or majority Africans, and the second half is where the elites belong to. So the Cashflow Quadrant has 4 types of people. So it's the employee, the self-employed, and the business and the investor. So we have the employee, the self-employed, this is the sole proprietor, the investor, and the businessman. So an entrepreneur can be an entrepreneur by the way can be in any quadrant. He can be a self-employed, he can be an investor or a businessman, or he can be an employee also. So you being an entrepreneur doesn't mean you are a businessman. So what basically what basically differentiate the businessman from the self-employed, yeah, from being called the entrepreneur? So basically a businessman is the guy who has set systems on his business to run without his presence. A self-employed, he's his own boss, meaning that the business is running based on his availability. If he's not here, the business will not run. If he's here, the business will run. So that's a self-employed, and that's a risk. The businessman, on the other hand, has systems. So he or she maybe is absent or is dead, the business still continues. That is the systems, and that's the importance of having systems. So I think I'm gonna have to listen to something.
The Cashflow Quadrant. Picture a big plus sign, 4 quadrants. In the top left, you've got E for employee. Top right is S for self-employed or small business owner. Bottom left is B for big business owner. And bottom right is I for investor. Most people live in the E quadrant. You trade time for money, you get benefits, you have some security, but you're also limited in how much you can earn because there's only 24 hours in a day. The S quadrant is where a lot of people think they want to be. You're a freelancer, consultant, small business owner. You're your own boss. But here's the catch. You're still trading time for money. If you stop working, the money stops coming.
The difference between these guys is time. So time is the essence. Time is the essence of life. Yeah. So the first quadrant, the first half, the first half, he and the employed and the self-employed, they trade their time to have money, to get more money. But for the investor and the businessman, a great example of the investor is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, and the great example of a businessman is Elon Musk, I think. Yeah. So their difference is that time, they don't have to trade their time to get them that money. They have systems that already run and that already need to optimize their time. So the self-employed, why is it a risk? So because suppose you die today or you get sick, so now you'll not be available for the business to run. Now the business will not run without you. That is money you are losing every time of the day. So the investor. So there are different ways you can invest as a Kenyan. I'm trying to look about that thing. So basically, now that the KPC shares were open and they are now closed, apparently it was oversubscribed, as the government says. And 3.1% of those investors are retail investors, meaning only 70,000 out of 2 million people, 2 million Kenyans have bought the shares. That's alarming, by the way. And now, I think it's on March 6th where they will start processing the refunds. So how do you start investing as a Kenyan? Yeah. So, Kenya, before the ZD Trader, you had to open a CDSC account, blah blah blah. You open that account, you start trading, you start investing. So you invest through a broker, maybe Faida Investment Bank or AB Axis and that shit. Okay. So now as the ZD Trader has come, you're not it's not a must to have that CDSC account. Yeah, and that's great, but you know. So yeah, so that's great, by the way. So how do you start trading? So now it's easier. Now we have to analyze how you can how I have to show you how you can analyze a company before you trade the shares. So we look at the price per earning based on the financials this year. We are currently in March, so this week and next week are when the financials will be dropping. How to analyze a company for investment in Kenya? You first understand the business or asset. One thing I like to say is, personally, I don't invest in companies that I don't use. Like a company that I don't use, like let's say a company that I don't use. I don't know which company I don't use, but yeah, you understand the business or the asset. So you have to learn about the company, how it runs, their products and their assets, okay, and their industry and their competitors. So like KPLC has no competitors. So yeah, that's one. Two, KPLC is the only I think company that sells electricity to us. After so Kenyan manufactures, KPLC sells to us. So meaning there's no other company. So meaning almost every Kenyans use KPLC. Two, you analyze the economy. How is the Kenyan GDP growth, the inflation and the interest rates currently? How is the political stability and the economic trends? Like now, Iran has been beefing with the US. So the oil industry has shaken a bit. Now maybe the KPC will get affected. So that we don't know. Yeah. So number three, you study the industry. You investigate the recent industry growth. You investigate the recent industry growth. So when was it listed? How is the financials been going? Like Uchumi was decommissioned a long time ago, but it's still listed. So how does Uchumi gets his operations? Recently, Uchumi has recorded a profit of 8 million. 8 million, that's huge for a company that's not existing. So how are they getting the profit? one of the ways they are getting the profit is by renting their stalls. So okay, now for analyzing, you compare valuation, the valuation of the share, the valuation of the company, I mean, and the price per earning. So yeah, so the price per earning ratio. So this basically measures the how much investors are willing to pay for each dollar of a company earnings. So that's crucial when buying shares. So like KPC, when you if you had investigated the valuation based on their price per earning, the valuation, it was overvalued. The evaluation was high. That's why at first it was undersubscribed. Maybe that's why the government extended the deadline. Now apparently now Uganda has bought majority shares, like 20%. Now they have a veto power to decide who's boss of the KPC. That's risky. So the PE ratio helps assess whether the stock is overvalued, fairly priced, or undervalued. Okay, so basically in terms of finance, it is a financial metric that compares company current share price to its earnings per share. Okay, so it's essentially essentially it shows how much investors are willing to pay today for each dollar of the company's profit. How to interpret PE shares? Before we get that, there are types of PE ratios. There are the trailing PE ratio and the forward PE ratio. Okay, so the trailing is based on the earnings from the past 12 months. Yeah, so this is basically used to reflect the company's performance, and the forward PE ratio uses the projected earnings for the next 12 months, often by estimates. Yeah, this helps investors to gauge the expected growth. So you can you basically use forward PE ratio to gauge if how KPC will grow in the next 12 months from now to March. Okay, yeah. So how to interpret the PE ratios is how to interpret. There's a high and the low PE ratio. But interpretation is easier. It's easy. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else.